I thought I was the first in my family to love someone of the same gender until my father walked into the room with a photo he had hidden for 30 years. I was mid-confession when the door creaked open, and there he was, me father, holding my past and his own in a single trembling hand. The irony burned hotter than my fear. I thought I was about to break a generational curse, not uncover one. I had waited years for the right moment to tell him. Not because I thought he'd react badly, though I wasn't sure, but because he was the kind of man who wore his silence like armor. A Vietnam vet. A mechanic. A provider. He loved us in the quietest ways: oil changes, extra shifts, showing up without saying much. Words weren't his thing. And yet, here I was, trying to find the right ones. I had rehearsed it dozens of times, coming out, that is. In the mirror. On walks. Into my pillow. But in real time, the words came out like a floodgate breaking open. Dad. I'm gay. His eyes didn't move. Not at first. He just looked down at the floor, like maybe the tile had cracked. I went on. There's someone. His name's Aaron. I didn't want to hide it anymore. Still, no words. But something shifted in his eyes. A flicker. Not anger. Not disappointment. Something older. Wiser. Wounded, maybe. That's when he turned, left the room without a word, and came back a minute later with that photo. A wrinkled 4x6, faded around the edges, like it had lived a secret life in an old wallet or tucked behind a drawer. He placed it in my hand like it was fragile. Sacred. And I froze. Two men. Shirtless. Young. Smiling in the sun. One of them unmistakably my father. His arm around another man I didn't recognize. My father's voice broke the silence. I loved him, he said simply. No fireworks. No dramatics. Just truth, raw and unfiltered. My heart didn't race, it stopped. All this time, I thought I was the first. Let me back up. My name's Eli. 23. Journalism grad. I moved back home to Indiana for a while after college, partly for the rent, mostly for my mom's meatloaf. That summer had been especially long, sticky with heat and unfinished truths. Aaron and I had been seeing each other for almost 8 months quietly. He was the opposite of me, sunlit, confident, unapologetically out. He made me laugh in a way that made my ribs sore. He kissed me like he meant it every single time. And yet, I'd kept him hidden from my family. From my dad, mostly. My mom. Well, I think she always knew. Mothers have that instinct. She never asked. But she left subtle signs of acceptance: Pride cookies left on the counter in June. A rainbow pin mysteriously tucked into my laundry pile. When I asked her about them, she just smiled. But my dad? Different story. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't homophobic. He just didn't talk. He existed in a world where feelings were locked behind toolboxes and baseball games. So I had convinced myself that telling him would break something. Or someone. Turns out, it would fix something instead. After he handed me the photo, we sat in silence. You know, the kind, heavy but oddly safe. Like the calm after a storm that never happened. I finally asked, who was he? Dean, he replied. We met in the summer of '78. Worked together at a lake resort in Michigan. And just like that, my father started talking. His voice, normally so guarded, took on a softness I'd never heard. He told me about bonfires on the beach, about sneaking into town just to hold hands in the dark. About how they shared a tent and a toothbrush, about a night under the stars when Dean whispered, "I wish this didn't have to end." But of course, it did. After that summer, we couldn't keep it going, he said, eyes cloudy with memory. I had to come back. Marry your mother. Do the right thing. My heart clenched. And you never told anyone? He shook his head. I tried to forget. Thought I did. I didn't know whether to cry for him or hug him or both. I thought I was alone in this, I said quietly. He looked up. You're not. Not now. Not ever. It wasn't forgiveness we exchanged that night. It was recognition. A shared lineage neither of us had expected. 2 generations. One truth, hidden too long. Over the following days, everything changed but not in the way I feared. Dad didn't suddenly become this hyper-supportive pride flag-waving father. But he started trying. And that was enough. He asked about Aaron. He even invited him over one night for ribs and a game of cards. The two of them ended up laughing over a stupid bet about whether ranch or blue cheese was superior. It's blue cheese. Obviously. And slowly, the air in our house lightened. The old silence was still there, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was filled with possibility. One night, a week later, I found my dad in the garage, holding that same photo again. He had a glass of whiskey in his hand, the photo in the other. I didn't interrupt. I just stood beside him. He said, "You know what I regret most?" I stayed quiet. Letting fear choose for me. Don't let it choose for you. I nodded. I won't. That night, I called Aaron and told him I wanted to stop hiding. Not just from my dad. From the world. The next morning, I updated my relationship status online. Public. No more secrets. The first like. My dad. That summer turned out to be the most transformative of my life, not just because I came out, but because I finally understood where I came from. Love doesn't start with you. It echoes. It passes down, even if it's been buried. Sometimes, the people you fear will never understand. Turn out to be the ones who understand best. And sometimes, healing doesn't start with a hug or an apology, it starts with an old photo, and a truth too beautiful to stay hidden. I remember the first time Aaron came over after the photo night. He was nervous, though he'd never admit it. He wore his safe shirt, a light blue button-up he only pulled out when meeting parents or attending funerals. I teased him about it in the car. "This is the shirt you wore to Professor Lindell's retirement party," I said. "That shirt got me a letter of recommendation," he shot back, then added with a smirk, "Maybe it'll get your dad to like me." I laughed, but we both knew this was more than just a meet-the-parents dinner. It was history turning a corner. A new thread weaving into old fabric. My mom had made her famous chili thick, spicy, and always too much, and set the table with the good dishes, the ones we only used for guests or Christmas. Dad stood at the grill, humming Johnny Cash, like it was just any other Thursday. But I noticed the small details, the shirt tucked in a little neater, the beard trimmed shorter, the clean fingernails. He was trying. And that mattered more than I could say. When he and Aaron finally met, it wasn't awkward. It was easy. Easier than I'd imagined. My dad extended a hand, and Aaron took it with a steady grip. They locked eyes for a moment. Not a stare down. More like a silent test, both of them trying to understand something unspoken in the other. Then Dad said, "Heard you like baseball." Aaron blinked. "Big Cubs fan, actually." Dad gave a smirk. "We'll work on that." They both laughed, and just like that, the air in the room shifted. We ate. We talked. They debated ribs versus chili like it was the fate of the free world. At one point, I leaned back in my chair and just watched them. My boyfriend and my father. Talking. Existing. No tension, no judgment. Just two men from different worlds, finding a middle ground. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. A week later, we found more than just old photos. Dad and I had been cleaning out the attic. Not for any real reason, it was one of those father-son chores that didn't require much talking but somehow always led to it. We were sorting through boxes labeled Smaz and Eli, middle school, when I found a small wooden box under a tarp. "What's this?" I asked, brushing off the dust. Dad hesitated. "Might be his. Dean's." He nodded. I opened it slowly. Inside were mementos, a cassette tape labeled Mixtape 78, a silver chain bracelet, a Polaroid of a canoe on a lake, a dried flower pressed between pages of a book titled Leaves of Grass. My hands trembled. "Why did you keep all of this?" I asked. He sat on an old cooler. "Because I couldn't forget." There was pain in his voice, but also something else, reverence. "That summer," he said, "was the first time I felt like I belonged somewhere. Not because of what I did, but because of who I was." I sat beside him, holding the mixtape. "You ever wish you'd told Mom?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. "I used to. But your mother knew. I think, in her way, she always did." That surprised me. She knew about Dean. Maybe not the details. But she knew I carried something. And she let me carry it. I didn't know what to say to that. Love is complicated. It doesn't fit into boxes labeled good or bad. It just is. We spent the rest of the afternoon listening to the mixtape on an old player. Dylan. Joni Mitchell. The Eagles. The music was scratchy, warped at times, but it didn't matter. Every song was a memory. A time capsule. Dad tapped his foot to Desperado, his eyes far away. I watched him, wondering how many years he had spent burying his truth, how many moments he had given up to be someone he wasn't. It made me love him more, not less. That night, I called Aaron and asked him to meet me at the lake near town. The same one where we'd first kissed under the docks last spring. He showed up in his usual hoodie and jeans, curls wet from the shower, and that lopsided grin that always made my chest ache a little. "I brought snacks," he said, holding up a bag of peanut M&Ms for emotional support. I laughed. "Good. You'll need them." We lay on the dock, staring up at the stars. I told him everything. About Dean. About the attic. About how my dad once risked everything for a summer of truth, only to tuck it away for decades. Aaron was quiet for a while. "I wish I could have met him," he said softly. "Dean?" "No. Your dad back then. I think I would have liked him." I looked over. "You like him now?" Aaron shrugged. "He's learning. That's enough." He reached over, took my hand. "That could have been us," he said. "Another lifetime. Another generation." "But it's not," I said. "We're here. And we're not hiding." The wind picked up, rustling the trees. I closed my eyes, letting it wash over me. We didn't kiss that night. We just existed. In truth. In light. In a world that, for the first time, didn't feel like it was waiting to punish us. A few days later, something unexpected happened. My dad came to me with an idea. "I want to go back," he said. "To Michigan?" He nodded. "To the resort. See what's still there." I didn't hesitate. "Let's go." So we did. Just the two of us. A road trip. 8 hours of classic rock, diner coffee, and awkward but necessary conversation. When we reached the lake, it was late afternoon. The sun hung low, casting gold across the water. The resort was still there, though updated. Flashier. But the bones of its dock, the cabins, the smell of pine remained. Dad walked slowly, like every step was a memory. We found cabin 4. He didn't go in. Just stood outside, staring at the door like it might open into the past. I carved our initials, he said, pointing to the tree nearby. I looked, and sure enough, faint but visible, D+J. He touched the bark, fingertips trembling. I loved him, he said again, voice breaking. And this time, I understood the cost of that love. The risk. The sacrifice. The silence that followed. I placed a hand on his shoulder. He mattered. He nodded. So do you. For the first time in my life, my father cried in front of me. And I let him. No judgment. No need to fix it. Just a son holding space for the man who taught him finally what it meant to live honestly. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't the old kind. It was full. Healing. New. By the time fall rolled around, things had changed. Aaron and I moved in together, just a small apartment downtown with creaky floors and too much IKEA furniture, but it was ours. My dad came by to help hang shelves. He even brought us a housewarming gift, a framed copy of the photo. The one of him and Dean. It belongs out in the open now, he said. And it did. We hung it near the entryway, so it would be the first thing people saw. A reminder of where we came from. Of the legacy we carried, not in shame, but in pride. One night, a few weeks later, my dad called. I've been thinking, he said. Maybe it's time I told your mom everything. I sat up straight. Are you sure? No, he said. But I owe it to her. And to myself. I didn't hear from him for a few days after that. When I finally did, his voice was lighter. She knew, he said. She cried. But not out of anger. Out of grief. For what we both missed. I didn't know what to say. She told me she still loves me, he added. And that she's proud of you. That night, I wept. Not because I was sad. But because, for the first time, I truly felt seen. Life moved forward, but it didn't forget. By Thanksgiving, Aaron had become a fixture at the dinner table. My aunt, who once referred to LGBTQ+ people as confused, brought him cranberry sauce and asked if he played pickleball. My cousin Harper told him about her TikTok crush and asked for dating advice. My mom hugged him every time he walked through the door. It was almost too normal. That strange, surreal kind of normal you don't trust at first because it took too long to earn. But beneath that new warmth, I could tell my dad was wrestling with something bigger than the past. His hands lingered longer on old photos. He stopped changing the radio when Elton John came on. One night, he knocked on our apartment door, holding a shoebox. I need help with something, he said. Aaron and I exchanged a glance. Sure. Come in. We cleared space on the kitchen table. He opened the box full of letters. Dozens of them. Yellowed envelopes, many addressed to Jonathan R. from Dean M. I didn't ask how he'd kept them hidden. Some secrets burrow so deep they become furniture. Never sent any back, he said quietly. I wanted to. But every time I tried, I froze. Aaron gently picked up one envelope. You kept them all. Every one. We read them aloud, one by one. Dean's words were funny, sharp, loving. There were poems. Mentions of books they read together. A paragraph describing the way my father smiled when he got nervous. By the third letter, my dad had tears in his eyes. By the sixth, he was openly sobbing. I tried to forget him, he said. I really tried. Maybe forgetting isn't the point, I said. Maybe remembering is what sets you free. He looked at me then like I'd said something he'd been waiting 30 years to hear. A few weeks later, I made a decision. Come with me to Pride, I said. Aaron turned his head. Seriously? Yeah. Your dad. I want him to come too. Aaron sat up on the couch. You think he would? I don't know, I said. But I have to ask. To my surprise, my dad said yes. We didn't do the full parody, said he didn't have the knees for marching, but we stood on the sidelines in matching rainbow hats that my mom insisted on buying. He held a tiny flag. I held his hand when he looked overwhelmed. When a group of veterans marched by holding signs that read, "We fought for everyone," my dad stood a little taller. At one point, he turned to me and said, "I should have done this sooner." "No," I replied. "You did it now. That's what matters." After the parade, we sat on the curb sharing funnel cake. He looked at all the couples walking hand in hand, unafraid, unapologetic. "I wish Dean could have seen this," he said. "Maybe he can," I said softly. He didn't reply, but he smiled. And that was enough. The week after Pride, something shifted. It began with a phone call. Unknown number. My dad answered it while at our apartment. I was making coffee. Aaron was feeding our neighbor's cat. I didn't think anything of it until I saw his face. He was pale. Jaw clenched. He said, "I need to step outside." 15 minutes later, he came back in and said 5 words that shook me. "Dean's alive. He's in Seattle." I stared at him. "What?" He sat down, hands shaking. That was his nephew. Dean's in a care home. Early onset dementia. He asked about me. The silence that followed was deafening. Aaron broke it. "You should go." Dad didn't respond. Not immediately. That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did I. The next morning, he packed a bag. We drove. Not because it was easier than flying, but because some journeys are too sacred to rush. We took turns behind the wheel. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. The road stretched out like a timeline neither of us had ever traveled. On the second day, he said something I'll never forget. "I'm terrified he won't remember me." I looked at him and replied, "Then remember for both of you." When we pulled into Seattle, it was raining. The sky was a dull slate, matching our nerves. The care facility was small, warm-looking. Not clinical. My dad stood in the parking lot for a full 10 minutes before walking in. The nurse was kind. Said Dean had good days and bad. "Today's been quiet," she said. "But he's awake." I stayed behind. He went in alone. He was gone for almost an hour. When he came back, he looked broken and whole at once. He didn't recognize me at first, he said. But when I showed him the picture, he touched my face and said, "Johnny." My throat tightened. We just sat there, he continued. I held his hand. Told him about the lake. About the music. About how much he meant to me. He wiped his eyes. He smiled. That was enough. That night, we stayed in a small hotel. He didn't say much, but he kept the photo on the nightstand. I told him I loved him, he whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some moments speak for themselves. We visited Dean again the next morning. This time, I went with him. Dean was thinner than the photo. Eyes a little glazed. But when he saw my dad, he lit up. Not fully but enough. I introduced myself. "This is Eli," my dad said. "My son." Dean blinked slowly, looked between us, then smiled. "You look like him." He didn't say much after that. Just held my dad's hand. But that was enough. As we left, Dean's nurse handed us something. "He used to look at this every night," she said. It was a cassette, another one. On the label, "Johnny, for later." My dad held it like it was gold. We listened to it that night in the car. Dean's voice, recorded decades ago, shaky but full of hope. If we ever find each other again, know that I never stopped loving you. Dad pulled over and cried. I cried too. Sometimes the heart holds on, even when the mind forgets. Back home, things felt different. Lighter. My dad started volunteering at an LGBTQ+ youth center downtown. Fixing bikes. Running the grill at fundraisers. Nothing flashy but everything meaningful. One day, he came to dinner with a box. I want you to have this, he said. Inside was a copy of Leaves of Grass. Dean's. Pressed flower still inside. You carry the next chapter, he said. I couldn't speak. Aaron hugged him. You're braver than most people ever get the chance to be. Dad smiled. Took me long enough. We never saw Dean again. He passed quietly that winter. His nephew called. Said he was peaceful. Said he kept the photo by his bed. We flew to Seattle for the memorial. It was small. Intimate. I watched my father speak. His voice cracked, but he stood tall. I loved him, he said, for the third time in my life. And I never got to say it in front of people. So I'll say it now. There were tears. Applause. Hugs. And after the service, something beautiful happened. A man approached Yusader, cane in hand, tears in his eyes. I knew you too, he said. That summer in Michigan. I remember. My dad looked at him, stunned. You were brave, the man said. Even then. My dad smiled through his tears. We tried. And that's when I knew. Some loves never die. They just wait. We returned from Seattle changed not just my father, but me too. I had witnessed a love that never got to grow and a man who had carried a secret for most of his life finally breathed without its weight. The day after the memorial, my dad asked if he could stay with us for a few days. I said yes, of course. What I didn't expect was to wake up the next morning to the sound of him and Aaron cooking pancakes together, arguing over whether chocolate chips belonged in the batter. They did. My dad was just wrong. When I walked in, rubbing my eyes, my dad turned and said, You two ever think about getting married? Aaron dropped a spoon. Not yet, I said, heart pounding a little. But maybe someday. Dad smiled. Just sayin'. I know a guy who grills a mean wedding steak. We all laughed, but there was something more beneath it. That laughter didn't come from discomfort anymore. It came from wholeness. That fall, Aaron and I adopted a dog. A scrappy rescue mutt with too much energy and a crooked tail. We named her Joni, after Joni Mitchell. My dad loved her. He'd show up randomly with treats or a new leash. The first time Joni barked at a rainbow kite in the park, my dad said, She's got taste. Around the same time, he started writing again. It started with little essays about Dean, about Vietnam, about the first time he realized he was different. Then longer pieces. I encouraged him to submit one to a veterans magazine. They published it under the title, Letters I Never Sent. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of letters came in. From closeted veterans. From men who loved and lost. From sons and daughters who finally understood their fathers. One letter came from a man named Peter in Arizona. I had a Dean too, he wrote. And I never told anyone. Until now. I read the letter aloud to Dad. He didn't say anything. Just nodded. Then wiped a tear away. That December, I took Aaron to the lake house my family used to visit when I was a kid. Snow had dusted the dock. We sat wrapped in blankets, thermoses of hot cider in our hands. I had planned it all. Even asked his sister for help choosing a ring. As the sun dipped over the frozen lake, I turned to him and said, "You once told me you wished we could have lived in another time." He nodded, eyes soft. "Yeah. A safer one." "Well," I said, "I don't want to live in any other time. Not without you." Then I got down on one knee. He cried before I could even ask. The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends. We held it in the backyard of my parents' house, under the oak tree I used to climb as a kid. My mom cried through the whole thing. My dad stood beside me as best man. And when the officiant asked if anyone had any words, my dad stepped forward. "I want to say this in front of everyone," he said, clearing his throat. "Because there were people I never got to say it in front of." He looked at us. "I used to think love was something you had to hide to protect. That silence was safer. But I was wrong. Love isn't meant to survive in the dark. It needs light. And you too, you've given me that light back." He paused. Dean would have been proud. I am too. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. A year passed. Then too. Life found its rhythm. Aaron started teaching photography at a local art school. I got a job with an investigative journalism podcast. We bought a second-hand couch that sank in the middle but was too comfortable to replace. Joni chewed through 3 pairs of my shoes, but Aaron's remained untouched. Swore it was a sign she liked him more. My dad came over often. For Sunday football. For lasagna. Just because. He became a fixture in our lives, stable, steady, softer. One afternoon, while helping him clean out the garage, I found another box. Smaller this time. Inside was a collection of things I didn't recognize: a rainbow handkerchief, a faded "Silence Equals Death" sticker from the ACT UP protests, and a flyer for an LGBT Veterans March dated 1991. "You went to this?" I asked. He nodded. "Drove to DC in the middle of the night. Didn't tell anyone. Wore sunglasses the whole time." I smiled. "You were braver than you thought." He didn't answer. Just handed me a letter. "To Eli," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I finally found the words. I've always wanted to tell you everything, but especially this. You saved me. Not with speeches. Not with big gestures. Just by being you. Open. Honest. Brave in ways I never could be at your age. You made me look at my past and decide I didn't want to die with secrets. Because of you, I didn't. Thank you for giving me that second chance. With love, always. Dad." I folded the letter and held it to my chest. My father passed 3 years later. It was sudden. A heart attack. He died in his sleep, quietly, peacefully, with Joni curled at the foot of his bed and leaves of grass still on his nightstand. At his memorial, I read the letter. I told the story of the photo. Of Dean. Of the truth that took decades to come into the light. And how, because of that truth, I found not just myself but my father too. There were veterans in the crowd. Young people from the center where he volunteered. A few old neighbors. Even Peter from Arizona came. We hugged like family. Aaron stood beside me the whole time. After the ceremony, we planted a tree in my dad's name. Aaron suggested a dogwood. "Strong roots," he said. "Soft flowers." It felt right. Sometimes I still hear his voice. When I doubt myself. When I wonder if the world's changing fast enough. When I watch Aaron sleep with one hand on Joni's back and think how lucky I am. I remember what he told me on our last walk together. "You carry the next chapter." I do. Every day. And I will. Because real love isn't just about who you hold. It's about what you leave behind. The end. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.